4 horrible radical left Democrat investigations of your all-time favorite president, me, is just a continuation of the most disgusting witch hunt in the history of our country.
This case is significant because it is the first time ever that a former United States president has been indicted. We've indicted governors and congressmen and senators and convicted them, but this is the head of our country being indicted for criminal behavior. Even though it's not the most significant criminal behavior, it suggests that he was running his business in a manner in which he regularly falsified his records in order to give him a favorable appearance. All of that is unique by itself. When you add it as a cumulative succession of cases, then the fact that there are all these cases, well, there's sort of a collective weight to all this evidence that suggests he wasn't cutting square legal corners. And you want the President of the United States to behave lawfully. We are now at the final moments of the grand jury making a decision. Grand juries generally do what the prosecutor asked them to do, but we don't know yet if the prosecutor has formally presented the charges. Once they formally present the charges, the grand jury votes on it. If the vote is the requisite affirmative vote, then they'll probably take this indictment in a sealed form and present it to the judge. This has been delayed for a long time. This prosecution started under the prior district attorney, Cyrus Vance. They had a slightly different theory, different charges. They were focusing on Donald Trump falsifying business records to cheat the banks into lending excess money to them that wasn't really justified by his own assets. Bragg, for whatever reasons, decided not to bring that case. There was something of a falling out between him and Vance's chief deputy, Mark Pomerantz. Mr. Pomerantz has written a book about that, but they dropped that theory and moved to a different theory now that says the hush money payment was falsifying the book's records because it was proclaimed to be legal expenses paid pursuant to a retainer agreement. And the district attorney alleges that they were not legal expenses, that was just simply hush money, and that there was no retainer agreement. Now, that can satisfy the falsification charge, but that's only a misdemeanor. To get this up to a felony and to get the potential time in prison from 1 year to 4, you've got to prove this was done to conceal some other crime. And that's where the charges get a little iffy, a little uncertain. Because if you say the crime was a violation of federal election law, it's not clear that New York State can enforce a federal law claim. Maybe some political motives in many prosecutions, but it's 2 straight district attorneys in Manhattan, Cyrus Vance, a very well-known name, respected name, and now Mr. Bragg, who in succession have brought charges against Donald Trump for falsifying business records. And that doesn't really surprise all of us because Mr. Trump has always had a reputation for having a rather loose relationship with factual accuracy. So if he calls this legal expenses when it is in fact hush money, I can certainly see why that could violate a New York statute. It misleads the voters, it misleads the public, and they are enforcing it. Well, why are there so many narratives? Because we never before have ever indicted a former president. This is unique. It is off the charts, and it's going to get political commentary from both sides. The allies of Donald Trump are going to speak out, and some of his rivals for the Republican nomination are going to hem and haw and say a few slightly critical things. That appears to be what Mr. Pence has done so far. And then on the Democratic side, They're just sitting back and enjoying this. I think that as the case goes on, this can't help Donald Trump overall. It might help him in the primaries by getting his name front and center, but I think the independent voter, who will ultimately decide most elections, is going to be somewhat disturbed. And then the biggest issue here that I think you should focus on is the timing. Donald Trump is almost certain to try to postpone these trials until after the primaries are over. And doing that denies the voters critical information. Is Donald Trump innocent or guilty of a crime? And that can affect many voters' decisions. There is one federal charge. It says if you are convicted, you may not serve any public office. But that crime may not be charged, and there is a constitutional issue. There's a famous Supreme Court decision involving Adam Clayton Powell, a former congressman from Harlem here, who was barred from Congress, and the Supreme Court overturned that. So he may be politically disadvantaged, and maybe the voters won't vote for him, but this particular crime cannot result in him being barred for office. District attorney is under some pressure. He did not charge the original indictment that had been approved by the former district attorney, Cyrus Vance, and he got political criticism for that. And I think as pressure grew from other sources, from Atlanta and from Washington, to also looking at prosecuting Donald Trump, he resurrected this old prosecution, the Stormy Daniels prosecution, which had been called, and they literally called this in the district attorney's office, the zombie case, because it had slept for a long time. And I think he resurrected it. It does have legal sufficiency, subject to this one problem of turning it into a felony. You've got to find an offense that you can legitimately prosecute in New York State, and that's quite problematic. Okay. Now, is he going to be criticized? Of course he's going to be criticized. This is a unique event that's never happened before. I would agree with one thing. I think this is a sideshow to the main event. The real main event, the championship fight, will be the special counsel, Mr. Smart, bringing charges, if he does, with regard to January 6th. That's the stuff of history. It's very hard to run for office and stand trial. This case could be scheduled for trial as early as the fall, probably no earlier than that. But that's just when the primary season is warming up, and the primaries will begin in February with Iowa and New Hampshire. Okay, that's going to be something he's always going to have to answer. He's going to be in New York some of that time, and he may also have other prosecutions. And then we have a list of prosecutors who want him to come to their jurisdiction for trial. And there could be still other charges elsewhere we haven't heard about. Okay, all of that consumes time, damages his reputation. It may get greater support from his core base, who thinks he is being wrongfully picked on and persecuted. And that's why I think the various prosecutors have to be very careful they don't look like they're just trying to humiliate him. I would tell them to avoid things like handcuffs or perp walks, because that does look like deliberate humiliation. Just focus on the charges.
Our enemies are desperate to stop us because they know that we are the only ones who can stop them.